It steals childhood.
Devastation.
É difícil aceitar. Você não aceita que é minha primeira filha.
The Tin Soldiers FOP Outreach campaign is an example of a case study that I really like because it's kind of unusual in many ways. The communications campaign started with a piece of content, and that content was a documentary film.
When I was 12, my left hip ossified, and that was like, you're not running, you're not playing sports, you're not going to the gym, you're not doing any of this stuff. And it was like, holy shit, like that's who I am.
Eles podem brincar em outro lugar, mas eu não posso. Eles podem correr atrás de pipa, eu não posso.
The body's soft tissues turn into bone.
It's a catastrophic disease.
People who have FOP eventually form a second skeleton.
The hardest thing, I think, is when she lost elbow movement in both arms.
Come and get me! Come and get me!
It started with an understanding of there is a community of people with an ultra-rare condition that the world doesn't know enough about, and that there are all these missing people with this ultra-rare condition who are probably misdiagnosed and undergoing all sorts of harm that is completely unnecessary.
That diagnosis is vital.
If I was one of those mothers with a child, I sure would want someone somewhere to care enough to search.
We're coming with hope.
When we have to find them, we just have to find them.
This particular project lent itself to a documentary film because the stories are so captivating and the people are so captivating. And the beauty of making a documentary film is that once it goes to market, once you set it out into the world like a child, is that it starts to run, and it runs at festivals, and you can get PR involved because the story is so interesting.
They lead such difficult lives, and yet in their faces, they have a light that just shines. It's just incredible.
What the film did for us, it created this amazing platform where we could create awareness with the community at large, but also with media, to be able to use that as almost like a launch pad for the initiative.
I know that now, Tin Soldiers enlightening our FOP world, so nobody will live in isolation anymore.
So it created that very big awareness, and it really did a great job for us.
It's a rare medical condition, fibrodysplasia ossificans progressiva.
I have never heard of fibrodysplasia ossificans progressiva before.
We got profiled with all the key radio stations, television stations, and print publications. We had lots of interviews with medical doctors, as well as the mums and the filmmaker and the people that started off the FOP initiative.
This has been, for me, a grand adventure for the last 30 years.
We got extensive coverage at very little cost.
This campaign is also slightly unusual in that a production team and a communications team ended up designing a whole architecture for a non-profit outreach program that is essentially a communications program, but we designed that.
Tin Soldiers in Alex will be screening at 12 o'clock midday. It's free of charge.
So we came up with a communication strategy or structural framework which spoke to 4 different target audiences in a very unique and specific way by using the platforms that would reach them, as well as then developing the content to put onto those platforms to be very targeted. So as an example, we had healthcare practitioners, which is a very niche or targeted segment of the market. We found platforms that speak very squarely to them, so there was no wastage and very efficient from that point of view. And we made sure the content was relevant and communicated in a way that was relevant to healthcare practitioners.
It's a story that starts with hurt and suffering. It's a story about medical responsibility, but also about a wonderful community of people and an amazing story of scientific discovery and endeavor.
So from a medical education perspective, we put together a global CME Master Series, which consists of 8 different parts over a 3 to 4 month period. It's a lecture environment that will take you from an introduction to FOP into a very specialized caring environment with the stakeholders along the way. So it really walks you through that patient journey and the different disciplines that would be interacting with an FOP patient and the importance of early diagnosis.
Heterotopic ossification, or HO.
The prevalence of the disease is very controversial.
This is randomly assigned to some of the participants.
Then if we looked at the other end of the spectrum, we would be looking at the general public, which was another big target market for us. And again, there we were looking at platforms that would talk specifically to the communities that we wanted to reach, a lot of them underserved communities, so the platform's very targeted to those kinds of markets.
Using our technology platform, businesses can crowdsource data and gather insights quickly, while users earn money by completing quick and simple micro jobs.
We're in a developing market and the world is changing all the time. One of the things that we know with digital phones is that people don't always have access to a smartphone. So putting something online isn't necessarily a solution. We need to be able to communicate on feature phones, we need to be able to communicate on basic phones, and we are currently in the pilot phase now of looking at more text-based and video content that would function in those environments, preferably at a reduced cost to the end user, which would enable them to get access to information which they may not have been able to do historically.
The scalability point is quite interesting because it's not just across this rare condition, across many different rare conditions, but also not just in South Africa, but also globally. We wanted to make sure that it was a format that with a bit of tweaking and a bit of changing could work literally in any market. And because of the way the pillars work and we define who the target markets are, who the platforms are and what the content is, those things might change per market or per country, but actually what you populate with is going to change, but that framework stays exactly the same. So it becomes a very scalable model.
We established a nonprofit, we launched an awareness campaign, and that awareness campaign plays out in 4 different pillars, if you like, of target audiences, from formal medical to informal medical to community to networks. And so that has its tentacles going out in the world, and there's different content being made for those different platforms. And in each environment, there are measurable outcomes. So it's created a very sustainable, not campaign, program.